Major support provided by Chevron, the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, Edison International, Valley Strong Credit Union, California Resources Corporation, Panama Buena Vista Union School District, Bakersfield City School District, and the Kern High School District, with additional production assistance provided by these supporters of education in Kern County and throughout the state of California.
We're here today with John Lenko, the coordinator of Kern Educational Television Network. It's the provider, the service provider, I would say, of the Do the Math program. So this is the man who makes everything else happen other than Do the Math that happens here in the county of Kern.
No. I'm just one of them. I have a great team.
Well, he's one of the many, but he does have the title of coordinator. But now he's not just a coordinator of the KETN network. He's a racer.
I am.
And it looks like when you're not busy helping out with the county superintendent of schools office, what do we have going on here?
Well, this is our dragster. We're getting ready for the March meet.
Okay.
It's the 64th annual March meet. So we'll be out there competing with our dragster in the Nostalgia Eliminator class. The March meet is for a nostalgic vehicle. So this vehicle represents what a dragster might have looked like in about 1968, 1969 era.
Okay.
And we're using that technology from that era as well.
Beautiful. So you talk about a dragster. What qualifies this as a dragster, and what type of, when you say race, what kind, some people might picture NASCAR doing laps. This obviously does not look the same as a NASCAR, what people would normally think of particularly. What's the difference between this and a regular race car, and what is drag racing?
Well, a dragster is a purposely built vehicle, and its job is to go down the quarter mile as quickly and safely as it can be. And it's an ever-evolving design. So this design, where the driver sits behind the engine, was very popular up until about 1970. In 1971, things started to change, and in a couple of years, the configuration of these cars changed dramatically. The driver was moved in front of the engine for obvious safety measures. So that's what a dragster is a purposely built vehicle for drag racing. And a drag race is an acceleration contest between two vehicles over the course of a quarter mile. They start from a standing start. First car to the finish line wins, the other car is eliminated.
So looking at this design, I'm pretty sure when you say a quarter mile, it's just straight down the track, like you said, as straight as possible, as safe as possible. So it's not exactly made to turn, it's made to go as straight as it can, as fast as it can.
Everything in the design of the car is to aid in it going straight and doing it safely.
Okay, now I'm looking at the car. In our next segment, we'll definitely get into the nitty gritty, like what is everything. Real quickly, could you get, what got you into drag racing?
Well, I always had an interest in it. When I was a young guy, about the age of some of the viewers of our show, they all had sports heroes who were football players or baseball players. My heroes were race car drivers, and specifically drag racers.
Okay.
So this is the style of car that I saw my heroes drive when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. And so that's what I've grown up to do and want to do as a hobby.
That's amazing. So now when you talk about driving down the quarter mile as fastly, as safely as you can, is it all about speed and whoever gets there the fastest? Obviously, I'm assuming whoever gets there slowest is eliminated, but are you racing against everyone who's there that day, or do you specifically shoot for a specific speed or a time?
Excellent question. We race in what's called an index class, and that index class has a performance target. Our performance target is 7.6 seconds elapsed time, the time it takes us to get from the starting line to the finish line, 7.6 seconds. So that is the limiter in our class, and the other classes have different time limits like that. They're called indexes. So we're trying to make our car run as close to that 7.6 seconds as possible without going quicker. We want to get to the finish line first before our competitor gets there, but we can't go quicker than 7.6 seconds or we'll be disqualified.
So it's all about, it's coming up to it. We don't want to go over it. So you're meaning you don't want to be fast. You can't be too fast. Is that what I think some people might get confused and think going over the time really means coming in too far under the time. You don't want to be like a 7.4 or 7.3. That's a little, you're going too fast for your index or your class?
Correct. And there are other classes that don't have indexes where the first car and the fastest car wins. But as a cost containment measure, they've added indexes to certain classes. For example, if we were in a class where we could set our own index, your pickup truck might take 17.5 seconds to go down the quarter mile. Well, this dragster will do it in 7.5 seconds.
I'm not going to make it very far in the bracket with it.
And it wouldn't be a very fair race.
Okay.
But what if we gave your truck a 10-second head start? Now you're trying to get there in that remaining 7.5 seconds. I've got 7.5 seconds to chase you down.
To beat me as I make my way down there.
Then all of a sudden, it's a different animal.
Okay.
It's a different race.
So that's where the indexes come in, to keep the competitiveness without telling you need to go against someone who can make it in 4 seconds. Where you're going, it's not going to happen.
It contains our cost quite a bit too.
That's amazing. John, thanks for having us out here.
Yep,
when we come back, we're going to take a closer look at this dragster and figure out, why is it so long? Why are certain features the way they are? What purpose do they have? And we're back out here with John Lenko, one of the many people responsible for the Do the Math program here in Kern County. And specifically today, I'm not even focused on that part. We're
talking racing.
How does the math come into racing here? We talked earlier about the general specifics of what a dragster is, what a drag race is. Now let's take a look at all of this that goes into it.
Well, drag racing is really all about the math. There's a ton of math that we're doing constantly, and there's a ton of design in these cars. These cars are specifically designed to do one task. Just like those big earth movers that you went and saw, those big caterpillars, they're designed to do those tasks. They're very heavy duty. This is a very light duty in certain areas because we want to conserve weight. So the car is made out of a steel tubing. The chassis is a thin wall steel tubing.
And that's this part right here?
Right. These tubes,
where everything connects to it.
Right. These tubes are only 58 thousandths of an inch thick.
Wow.
It's a very thin wall aircraft tubing, but it's strong and resilient. The front end has a very lightweight axle. You mentioned in the last segment, the front tires are very small. They're basically a high-speed motorcycle tire.
Okay, so really it's there just to make sure you're on course, not so much about handling the torque or the ground, more of a direction.
Our course is a straight course, so it's minor corrections as we're going down the track. We really don't have much of a turning radius in this. Okay. You know? We see the front wing here.
Yeah, this reminds me of like a sports car. Is that, some of them are for show, some are for actual effect. Does this one? Which one is this one providing?
If you look at the wing, the airfoil element of the wing is down. Typically, a wing, if it wanted if you wanted to take advantage of the lift, it would be flipped the other way.
Right. In an airplane, you want that pressure to bring it up. I'm taking it because it's flipped. We want that pressure pushing you down.
We want it at high speed, at 170 or 80 miles an hour, to be pushing this front end down for better traction without a weight penalty. So that wing at speed is giving us that downforce.
Okay. So as we move our way back here, real quickly on this tire up front here, I see that sort of a disc. I don't see it on the left side, only the right side. Is that another effect, or is that for something else?
That actually serves a very valuable purpose. The timing at the racetrack is light beams that go across, across the track, okay? And that serves to break that beam. That's what gives us the indication of timing at different points on the racetrack. That lets us put the car exactly on the starting line.
So we're moving back here. I now see some sort of tank.
So this is the fuel tank.
Fuel tank.
And it holds, this cart holds about 7 gallons of methanol fuel.
Methanol. Can I go down to the local 7-Eleven Chevron Shell? Can I go pick up some methanol?
No.
Go and put it in my truck and drive around town.
Methanol is a fuel really used in racing.
Okay.
And it gives us more horsepower and has less heat buildup than gasoline.
I'm going to assume that's the incredibly, 7 gallons of incredibly volatile fuel. And right behind it looks like we have some good safety measures here.
Right, we've got 20 pounds of fire bottles, 2 10-pound fire bottles here of extinguisher that is plumbed through these steel lines back to nozzles that are strategically placed on the car so that if we have an issue, if we have a flash fire or fire, the driver can hit an activating knob that sets these bottles off and floods the area with fire retardant. Douse that fire quickly.
We're going our way back from the fire bottles now. I see a lot of hoses and some things that people might have seen in a movie, up top on the engine here, a big belt. Kind of generally, what are we looking at here that I think is the engine, as we could call it?
It is. The engine is based on a 1957 Chrysler.
1957 Chrysler. With a completely new transmission.
392 Hemi. It has hemispherical combustion chambers. Where the valves sit, there's half a sphere, a hemisphere. This model is the original Hemi. They were very popular in the late 60s.
So even the Hemis we see today, this is where it all got started.
Yes, it all started with this. We add the power with the supercharger. So this is a supercharger that takes the air and fuel mixture and forces it into the cylinders. The air and fuel is forced into the cylinders, making those cylinders more efficient and making more power.
Okay, so going up front here, I see this massive belt. I know a lot of people, if they look inside, somebody's vehicle, a passenger vehicle, they might see multiple belts. What is this belt specifically designed to do?
This is the drive belt that drives the supercharger. It connects from the crankshaft down here up by this cog belt to the supercharger, and the rotation of the crankshaft turns the supercharger. This idler here, this pulley, simply is there to take up the slack in the belt. That's all its job is.
Awesome.
So that's where we're making the power, is by spinning that supercharger.
I'm looking at a tire that's about as wide as I am, and it's huge. So is this where the power is going to?
It is, and it's a purposely designed racing tire. We call it a drag racing slick. It's slick because the surface of the tire is slick.
There's no tread or anything, so I don't want to take this mudding or anything like that.
Right. In fact, if we compare it to a conventional tire, you can see that a conventional tire has a very aggressive tread, and that tread is there to do a number of things. On the street, there's a lot of different conditions that motorists encounter. So they're going to have rain or mud or other things like that. These channels are there to push and sipe that water away.
Pull everything away so it can
gives
maintain
that water
contact.
or that mud a place to go. But on the racing surface, the track is groomed, it's very flat, it's got a huge amount of traction, so we want the biggest footprint when the car's sitting on the ground of tire, of rubber that we can have on the racing surface. So if you look at the surface area of this, if we look just the top of it, there's very much less with the top of this tread pattern.
Especially with all the different places where you're not touching the ground. But here, the entire surface is on the ground, producing the most power onto the asphalt. Looking inside, doesn't look overly complicated, but it doesn't look like a typical passenger vehicle setup with a steering wheel and a shifter.
Like, again, just the components that we need for going down the quarter mile. There are obviously no creature comforts. The steering wheel looks different than what you're used to seeing because we only have to turn it a very small amount. The shifter is right here, close and accessible. The brake on this car is actually a hand brake. There's a lever on this side that lets me use the brake. And then the accelerator pedal's on the proper side, and there's a footrest for your foot on the other side. Safety belts.
Always important, especially when you're doing 180 miles an hour.
And these are covered with a flame-proof coating as well. And then back here at the back, we have dual parachutes to slow us down. We have brakes on the car, but these parachutes will really slow us down. We're required to have one. I like to have two just for backup.
We'll come back to here in a little bit, and when we come back, we'll take a look at, because this is an older style dragster, how does John modify the engine and different components to make him faster or slower? We'll see what happens when we come back. All right, back out here with John Lenko and his dragster. We've taken a look at the entire car, and now we're really going to dive into how do you change it up? Because I know there's not a lot you can do with it with an older engine where there's no electronics really on the entire engine itself. So we have a massive piece of metal here. I have no idea what this is. I guess we could start with your times. Based on your times, do you make modifications?
One of the major things that we look at is what we call the time slip. At the end of every race down the racetrack, we stop and we get a computer printout of what the performance of the car was at different incremental spots along the track. So I'll put some time slips together for you so you can see what they look like. They give us a ton of feedback and information on each pass down the track. We see some of the things that are reflected in the time slip, the car number, obviously, the class, 760 is the index.
Okay, so that's where you're shooting for that, as close to 7.6 without going too fast.
What we're aiming for. RT is the reaction time. This is the time that the driver spent leaving the starting line. How close to the green light coming on did the driver leave the starting line? I actually left too soon.
I was going to say, if it's a negative, that must mean you, three thousandths of a second too early?
Right, the car left 3 thousandths too early. But again, this was during time trials, so there's no penalty for that. That's just a reflection of my performance at that point. The 60-foot time, how long did the car take to go 60 feet? 3:30, the 8th mile. These are all incremental times that, as we compare time slip to time slip, is going to begin to tell us a story. At the quarter mile, the car went 7.594. We were aiming for 760.
Wow, you were 6,000. That's amazing.
Pretty close. We felt pretty good about that.
Absolutely.
Again, being a time trial, we're not penalized for that. That just gives us that feedback. That's our practice run. And the mile an hour, 182. Let's look at another time slip now. So we came back, Billy and I talked about it, and we said we were so close, let's leave it alone and run and try and get it to that 60
See what happens
number.
at the next one.
Again, the incrementals, we're almost at the exact same number, exact same mile an hour. Let's look at one more then. So Billy and I decided we're going to slow the car down. We're going to take some power away. Okay. We did that by adjusting the speed of the supercharger. We'll talk about that in a second. We made one small change. The car went quite a bit slower to us.
Right, yeah, we're no longer 6,000. Now we're almost 2/10 over, almost a tenth over.
Right, a full tenth. Mile an hour, still comparable to what we'd done before.
Okay.
So when it came time for eliminations, now it's time for the race, all right? We decided, after looking at this feedback, to go back to our 759 tune-up, okay?
Okay.
So if we look at that, the first pass, our car number 33, against our competitor, we get down to the finish line. First to start the reaction time, we talk about an 0:36 reaction time.
Okay, so you were quicker on the pedal than your opponent.
Our competitor had a slower reaction time. Get down to the finish line, we draw the win. Now we're in competition, so we get an indication of the win. I got there first. I did not go faster than 7.6 seconds.
Okay.
But I went quite a bit slower than 7.6 seconds.
Okay.
The competitor was much closer. My mile an hour now way off.
Whoa.
This is telling us a story. This is telling us that as I got down there, I never saw the competitor, so I let off the accelerator and I actually grabbed a lot of brake. I slowed the car down because all I got to do is get to that finish line before the competitor does.
Right.
So the difference in the race was at that starting line.
Okay, so
That's what
because
made a
you're able
big
to get
difference.
on it 0.3 of a second faster, all of a sudden you're getting the acceleration, it's exponentially increasing your distance.
Big difference. And then the next round of competition, this is a very interesting pass, all right? We should begin with the react. Again, both of us aiming for 760. The reaction time, 0:28 to my competitor's 0:19.
Man.
He's got a better reaction time.
Okay.
We're going down the track together. We get to the finish line. We're going down the track side by side. We get to the finish line.
Oh,
He
you
draws
were
the
a
win
little
because-
too fast. You were under 7.6.
Right. But the mile an hour was also off.
You
that
were also
indicates
going faster.
I was on the brake because usually we're running 180 something in the mile an hour. We look down here and we see left got there first by 59 10,000ths. So I was getting to the finish line before the competitor as closely as I could, but I went too quick. The difference there, that starting line reaction time. He had a better reaction time than I did.
So real quickly, how do you modify, because there's not much you can modify, the supercharger, what do you do and what does it modify? Real quickly, we'll wrap it up here.
Right.
But how does the supercharger change the car's performance?
So this supercharger is a big air pump. These vanes in here spin and they compress the air and force it into the engine. So you can see them spinning there.
Okay,
The
so it's
speed,
grabbing that air and pushing it down into the cylinder.
the speed with which we spin those is reflected by the pulleys. So we have a pulley we showed you earlier on the crankshaft. We have a pulley. We're running a 41 pulley with 41 teeth in it.
Okay.
If we have the pulley on top on the supercharger with 41 teeth, then we are spinning that supercharger at a ratio 1:1.
Okay.
If we want to add horsepower, we know that we need to spin that supercharger faster. We take a smaller pulley.
Okay,
put
so
that
even though
smaller
this one's
pulley-
spinning once, it's going to have more than one revolution. It's going to have one and a little over a quarter more
Right.
for the supercharger.
Right. And so now we can spin that faster. We can keep adjusting the ratio between these to speed up or slow down the supercharger to add or take power away.
So that's
as we're
how you
doing it.
modify your speed and
It
how
is.
you kind of play with the times there.
It is.
Really? You're thinking it's really just a ratio.
All mechanical.
And that's all math.
Right, and there's a ton of ratios in this car. There's ratios everywhere.
That's
Math
amazing.
Everywhere in estimation, and man, it's all day long. We're doing
That's awesome. John, thank you so much for having us out here. Thanks for helping us do the math as always, even behind the scenes. We're loving to see what you do outside of doing the math. And even outside of doing the math, you're still doing the math, and it's amazing to see. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Wait a minute, Mick, there's one more thing we got to do before we take the car to the track. We got to warm it up.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And we need a driver in the cockpit. So would you serve as the driver?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
We'll send it back to you guys in the studio. Check out, looking for some bonus footage.
Let's go
and
warm
we'll
it
see
up.
what we can do.
Come on. Here we go. Congratulations, Dragster driver.
Whew, I don't know how you sit. That's a little tight for my comfort. I don't know if, but I'm sure when you're running 180 miles an hour down the track, it's
Never think
well
about
worth it every
Never
time.
think about it. Yeah.
John, like I said earlier, thanks again for having us out here. This is amazing. I don't think I've ever been that close to a dragster, let alone have the power ready to go.
Well, thanks, Vic. I appreciate it.